What if I told you that the most powerful weapon of colonization was not the gun, but the rewriting of spiritual identity? That the true battle was for more than just land or resources, but the total takeover and control of African minds and spirituality. When Ryan Coogler gave us the ancestral plane in Black Panther, he wasn't just telling us a certain aspect of a superhero story, he was pointing us back to something colonizers had fought so hard to erase: the living and breathing power of ancestors. In Black Panther, there's a moment that leaves us totally and completely breathless. It's the moment that T'Challa drinks the heart-shaped herb, lies buried in the soil, and awakens in a world bathed in purple twilight known as the Ancestral Plane, where the boundaries between life and death dissolves. Over there, his father King T'Chaka appears not as a ghost or memory, but as a real presence, speaking, guiding, preparing his son for the weight of kingship. For many Western audiences, this was great fantasy, but for the African people, it felt familiar. It didn't feel like fiction, but instead it felt like the reawakening of an ancient memory. Among the Shona people of Zimbabwe, ancestors are called Vadzimu. They are not some distant specter conjured up by old folklore. They are family from the past, guardians who return back to this realm after their death to help guide and protect their loved ones. When a family suffers illness, misfortune, or conflict, it is often believed that is when ancestors come through in order to call attention to what must be done in order to restore balance. Spirit mediums known as Shikiro act as vessels for these ancestors. In sacred rituals, a Shikiro may channel an ancestor's energy, offering guidance, warnings, and healing from the unseen. This is strikingly similar to T'Challa's encounter with his father. Instead of praying to a faraway deity, he's communing directly with his own bloodline. When T'Chaka tells his son to stand up, "You're a king," he's not just offering encouragement to his son. It is an ancestral reminder of identity, duty, and power. So how do people enter this ancestral plane in real life? Well, in Zimbabwe, ancient rituals like Kurova Gua, for example, are performed to welcome the spirit of the deceased back into the family as an ancestor. Only then are they fully able to take their place as one of the protectors and guides. In the ceremony, drumming, dancing, singing, and the uttering of sacred words open the way. Traditional alcohol tied to the bloodline is poured as libations. Key words are spoken aloud, and the boundary between the seen and unseen begins to dissolve. And in Black Panther, the process mirrors this truth. T'Challa doesn't just stumble into the ancestral plane by accident. He undergoes a ritual process that includes drinking the sacred herb, being buried in the soil, all the while surrounded by powerful chanting. The film presents ritual practice as a form of technology, a gateway to the spiritual world.
We were surprised to see that the African is not only civilized, but has a strong cultural community.
But here's the real tragedy. When colonial missionaries arrived in Africa, they saw a people deeply connected to their land, to their culture, and to their ancestors. They saw communities unified by rituals that gave them strength, resilience, and identity. And they also saw something else: the undeniable power of spirit mediums. Among the Shona, Shikiro were healers, leaders, and mediators. They influenced communities, inspired self-identity that was rooted in cultural values, and even performed miraculous healings that were shocking for the uninitiated. Soon enough, though, the colonizers understood one thing: that as long as Africans remained rooted in their ancestral traditions, they could never, and I mean never, be controlled. So they set out to sever the root, to dismantle everything. Missionaries began to label spirit mediums as witch doctors. Rituals were condemned as sorcery, and ultimately ancestors were rebranded as demons. In Zimbabwe, this campaign intensified after the first Chimurenga in the 1890s, when spirit mediums like Nehanda and Kaguvi called upon their ancestral authority to resist British rule. Ultimately, their influence terrified the colonizers, who realized that ancestral connection was not just spiritual, it had become political. From then on, shrines were desecrated, ceremonies were banned under colonial law, and Africans were told that if they communed with their ancestors, they were inviting Satan, and if they poured libations, they risked eternal hellfire as a result. Their mission was never about saving souls. It was about breaking a culture's backbone. By stripping away the ancestors, they stripped away a people's unity, cultural memory, and ultimately their power. Sadly, these wounds run deep. Generations have grown up fearful of indigenous practices, ashamed of ancestral beliefs and traditions. And yet, in Shona cosmology, their ancestors were never in competition with God. Instead, the ancestors, by Shona definition, are actually a bridge, the ones who carry the family's prayers to Mwari, the Creator, and return with guidance and blessings. To remove them is to cut off that spiritual bridge between humanity and the divine. This spiritual colonization created a generational trauma, one that lingers even today, as many wrestle with Christianity that was learned through programming, while the blood in their veins remembers something older and truly sacred. And this is why Black Panther struck so deep for many of us. When T'Challa kneels in the ancestral plane and embraces his father, it does more than simply tell a story. It begins to rewrite centuries of propaganda. It says to honor the ancestors is not a rejection of God. It is to reclaim a sacred continuity that colonization tried but failed to erase. In African traditions, ancestors are more than guides. They are shields. They protect us against misfortune, illness, and enemies. Rituals are often collective, safeguarding not just individuals, but entire communities. And in Black Panther, T'Challa's connection to his ancestors not only empowers him to face Killmonger, but it ultimately helps him to shoulder Wakanda's future. In the same way, Africans for centuries have drawn strength from the voice of those who came before. For the African diaspora, Black Panther was more than just a superhero movie. It was a form of medicine. Generations of people torn from their roots felt, maybe for the first time, what it looks like to see their ancestors honored on the big screen, showing them not as demons or forbidden, but as sacred connection to one's own bloodline. The ancestral plane became a cinematic way of saying, you are not rootless, you are not forgotten, your ancestors walk with you, still to this day. And Africa is not alone in this truth. In China, families honor their dead in the Qingming festival. Among the Maori people, Waka Papa links every person directly to their ancestors and also to the land. Native American traditions revere their grandmothers and grandfathers who continue to shape their lives on a day-to-day basis. But what Black Panther truly achieved was to recenter Africa's spiritual tradition in the global imagination, to directly show that African spirituality is not primitive but profound, not backward but truly essential. The ancestral plane isn't simply fiction, it is the visual language of a truth Africans have always known, that the living and the dead are bound in an unbroken chain. Colonialism tried to break that chain with fear, with propaganda, and with shame. The ancestors wait patiently. They wait for us to remember. To call upon them is not to summon demons. It is to reconnect with God through that very line of those who brought us here. It is to reclaim the wisdom, the protection, and love that flows between these two worlds. So the next time you watch Black Panther, when T'Challa kneels before his father in that purple twilight, remember, this is more than just a cool moment in a movie. It is a spiritual reality, a reminder that the ancestors are always watching, always waiting, and always speaking to us. With that being said, thanks for watching. Until next time.